Hey guys, it's me, Rich. The world's most critical oil choke point is being circled by warships right now, and most people have no idea how close things are to the edge. Your energy prices, your economy, your daily life, all of it runs through a strip of water barely 21 miles wide. And right now, we're going to cover how over 20 countries have just signed a joint statement signaling they're prepared to send military forces to keep it open. And the United States has already been dropping 5,000-pound bunker busters on Iran's coastline. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to RPW Media. Look, become a subscriber, hit the bell, smack the like button. Thank you. Okay. So, picture a strip of water, not the Pacific Ocean, not even the Atlantic. We're talking about a channel barely 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. And yet, roughly 1/5 of every barrel of oil and every cubic foot of natural gas that moves across this planet passes through that strip. It's called the Strait of Hormuz. And right now, it is at the center of a geopolitical standoff that could reshape global energy markets almost overnight. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Iran, the Islamist government, sitting on one side of that narrow corridor, has been doing everything in its power to make that passage as dangerous as possible. Drone attacks, missile attacks, mines in the water, and the targeting of civilian vessels that have absolutely nothing to do with any military operation. Just cargo ships, just tankers, just the global economy trying to function. And what's the response from the international community? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. The Iranian regime is acting just like our Democrats with their refusal to fund DHS because they want to keep illegal aliens in the country so that they and all their other voting scams that they've been using for decades can continue. The Democrats are punishing the innocent American people who have nothing to do with the scams that they're trying to protect. Okay, so over 20 nations, and we're not talking about small players here either, guys. They have now issued a joint statement signaling their readiness to contribute to military efforts aimed at keeping that waterway open. The coalition includes Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Czechia, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, the Republic of Korea, Romania, Slovenia, Sweden, the United Arab Emirates, and the United Kingdom. Now that's a serious list, right? When a coalition that size starts coordinating around maritime security, it's not a press release, guys. It's more of a warning shot. And the language in the statement was not diplomatic mush or gobbledygook. These governments did not soften anything for once. They called out Iran directly, and they didn't bury it in bureaucratic phrasing. Part of what they said was, quote, "We express our deep concern about the escalating conflict. We call on Iran to cease immediately its threats, laying of mines, drone and missile attacks, and other attempts to block the strait to commercial shipping, and to comply with UN Security Council Resolution 2817. That's about as direct as international coalition statements ever get, guys. They also went a step further, making it crystal clear why this isn't just a regional issue, saying, quote, "Freedom of navigation is a fundamental principle of international law, including under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea." You see, the effects of Iran's actions will be felt by people in all parts of the world, especially the most vulnerable, end quote. Now, they're not wrong. The Strait of Hormuz is not a diplomatic abstraction. It is the valve on the global energy system. When it functions, prices stay relatively stable. But when it doesn't, and history has shown us this more than once, markets don't just wobble, guys, they convulse. Now, here's where this whole story takes a sharp turn, because while the diplomats were releasing their carefully worded joint statement, the United States military has been doing something considerably less wordy. According to Admiral Brad Cooper, the commander of the U.S. Central Command, American forces have already conducted strikes against missile infrastructure along Iran's coastline, specifically targeting underground facilities used to store missile systems and launch equipment. And they weren't using anything subtle. Cooper described the use of several 5,000-pound bunker-busting bombs against underground facilities. That's the kind of hardware you use when you're not interested in sending a message. You're interested in removing a capability. You see, the American military has converted every Iranian warship into a submarine. And so the Iranian regime has been firing artillery at ships trying to go by. Now, ships from all nations, except China, which is a big tell, don't you think? Now, Cooper was blunt about what that accomplished, saying, quote, "We not only took out the facility, but also destroyed intelligence support sites and missile radar relays that were used to monitor ship movements. Iran's ability to threaten freedom of navigation in and around the Strait of Hormuz is degraded as a result, and we will not stop pursuing these targets." We will not stop. I love it. Let that sit for a second. That's a sitting U.S. combatant commander on the record saying the strikes are going to continue. That is not background noise. That is the United States military telegraphing its intent in plain English, which, if you've paid attention to how these things usually work, is itself remarkable. The United States and Israel have also previously carried out operations that eliminated a significant portion of Iran's naval assets, including dozens of vessels designed specifically for laying sea mines. Guys, that's not trivial. That's a direct reduction in Iran's ability to execute one of its most dangerous asymmetric tactics. But here's the catch that keeps shipping companies up at night. And you need to hear this. There is a real, very real possibility that mines are already sitting in the water, placed before those strikes occurred. Iran doesn't need to lay a mine to blow up a ship. The threat doesn't disappear because the hardware does, right? It's all up here. So why is all of this happening right now at this particular moment? Part of the answer is President Trump. On Friday, he addressed the issue directly. And as is his habit, he made the argument that a lot of people in Washington dance around but never quite say out loud. Trump pointed out that the United States is now largely energy independent. American oil and gas production has transformed this country's position in a way that would have seemed almost impossible 20 years ago. The U.S. is not dependent on the Strait of Hormuz the way it once was. Europe is. Asia is. Gulf nations are. And Trump's point was essentially, you benefit from this waterway staying open, so you should be participating in keeping it open. He described it as, in his words, something that would be nice for allied nations to help with, noting that it would be a relatively simple military maneuver, but one that would require a large volume of ships to execute properly. Now, you can agree or disagree with how he framed that, but the underlying logic is hard to argue with. Continuous naval presence in a waterway is not a one-time event. You need patrol vessels, escort ships, surveillance aircraft flying around the clock, specialized teams searching the water for mines. That's not a weekend operation. It is a sustained resource-intensive commitment. And Trump's point is that the countries most economically dependent on that corridor passing safely shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines while American taxpayers foot the bill. Let's zoom out and make sure we're clear on the stakes here, because sometimes in the coverage of these events, the actual numbers get lost. Roughly 1/5 of the planet's oil and natural gas shipments move through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. The coalition's joint statement captured this with unusual clarity. Quote, "We emphasize that such interference with international shipping and the disruption of global energy supply chains constitute a threat to international peace and security. In this regard, we call for an immediate comprehensive moratorium on attacks on civilian infrastructure, including oil and gas installations." Now that word, moratorium, it's interesting. A moratorium implies that attacks on oil and gas installations are currently ongoing, not hypothetical, not threatened. They are ongoing. These are strikes against the energy infrastructure that powers civilization as we know it. And they've been happening regularly enough that a coalition of over 20 nations felt compelled to demand that they stop. Meanwhile, many commercial shipping companies are still routing vessels away from the strait entirely. The degrading of Iran's naval assets has reduced the threat, but it hasn't eliminated it. Iranian forces can still launch attacks from positions along the coastline, and the possibility of mines in the water means that every tanker captain making that passage is doing a calculation that involves probability and explosives. Here's what this all adds up to, and this is the part worth sitting with. The world just watched more than 20 nations, including most of America's key allies, formally announce that they are prepared to commit military resources to keep a single waterway open. That doesn't happen when people think things are fine. That happens when serious people in serious governments look at their intelligence reports and conclude that the threat is real and the window for diplomatic niceties is narrowing. The United States has already moved beyond statements. American forces are actively striking Iranian military infrastructure. The justification is explicitly about protecting freedom of navigation, and the commander on the ground has stated publicly that the strikes will continue. Iran has lost a significant portion of its maritime capability, but it hasn't been neutralized yet. And the possibility of mines already in the water means the threat picture doesn't resolve cleanly if Iran goes quiet tomorrow. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us watching one of the most consequential standoffs in global energy history, playing out in real time in a body of water most Americans couldn't find on a map, but whose stability determines what they pay at the pump, what their utility bills look like, and how the global economy performs. Now, here's the bottom line. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a military story. It's an economic story. It's an energy story, and ultimately a stability story for the entire global order. Iran has been doing everything it can to use that narrow passage as a weapon. More than 20 nations have now formally declared their readiness to push back. The United States is already conducting strikes, and President Trump has correctly pointed out that the countries most dependent on this waterway should be carrying more of the burden of defending it. So the upside? This coalition is real. The military action taken is real. And if allied nations follow through on their stated readiness to contribute, the Strait of Hormuz remains open and the global economy continues to function. That's not nothing. Guys, that's actually everything. All right, so tell me what you think in the comments below. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. 'Cause I'm